Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Finally doing some more gunner stuff here with Title Update 4 for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. This update definitely shook things up a bit more than Title Update 3, as we do kind of have a lot to talk about. Before I jump into all the new sets and stuff, I do want to make a quick disclaimer. All the sets and tests I do are built around a TA speedrunning environment, so I don't use things like heroics, I don't plan on bringing pets or followers, I don't restock MO and stuff like that. So some MOs, armors, and skills are more or less viable depending on your playstyle and what you're actually doing. And for the most part, my sets are built around not taking any hits, so it's really not the best for casual hunters. That being said, I will point out where you can fit in some quality of life skills that will drastically improve your survivability where possible. Hopefully this information helps you decide what you personally need for your gunner equipment sets and helps steer you towards what you should be prioritizing and what not to. Anyway, sorry about that, but let's just jump into this. Now, I won't actually be posting all the individual weapons and armor sets here. That's going to be in the description below in the Imgur albums. Feel free to grab that link and just go on with those. But what I'm going to be doing in this video is talk about the shift in skills and what we're going to be using now and why. To start, let's discuss the new heavy bowgun that we're going to be using for spread ammo, which is Velkhana's heavy bowgun, because there's only one new heavy bowgun. While this does seem like a downgrade compared to Chotranodon's with 10 less raw and 1 less spread 3 in the chamber, it's actually a really good gun. Clip 3 of Sticky 3 is great for KOs, and Clip 5 of Exhaust 2 can net you some nice dunks on monsters that can go airborne. It's really good and something Tetranodon can't do. And it's the reason why I still use Magnamalo's heavy bowgun is because it has the Sticky 3s and Exhaust 2s. So really, it's going to be more like Magnamalo's, and when you're comparing it to that, you're going to be trading 2 clip size of spread 3, but in return, you get walk and reload on the spread 3, better KO capabilities since you also have a clip 3 of Sticky 2 as well, 10 more raw, and a level 4 slot on the bowgun, which is very valuable right now. Plus, it has better recoil and reload by default, so you don't need as many slots for that. I still think there would be cases where you would prefer Tetranodons or Magnamalo's, but Velkhana's is a great in-between bowgun right now that can just do a lot for you, so this is going to be like my default bowgun for spreads. All the other bowguns we have are still going to be the same across the board. I did make a little infographic about the bowguns back in Title Update 2, please refer to that, it is still accurate, besides now we have Velkhana's. Alright, so now let's talk about our raw gunning sets for Title Update 4. The cool thing for Title Update 4 is that all our sets are way more simplified. Bad news is that you have to roll armor augments quite a bit more. With Title Update 4, a lot more skills are in the armor augment pool, and many of them are very common B tier skills. So we have the option now to use things like Mail of Hellfire, Bloodlust, Strife, and Dragonheart on our augments, which frees up the armor slots that were being used specifically for those skills before. I mentioned Dragonheart because it's a very powerful skill for raw gunning, granting us 10% more raw. In most cases, this is about 50 raw, it's pretty huge. Maintaining Dragonheart isn't actually too bad either. We can use pieces of Gyasmagorms to get Dereliction, and then we can still use Bloodlust, so that's like a double drain. Even though Bloodlust does cure our red HP when we activate it, it does stack with Dereliction to drain our HP very fast when it's not up, and with Bloodlust 3 now being an option, the affinity buff lasts 90 seconds instead of 60, which means we do have 90 seconds before we can reapply Bloodlust and reset our HP, so it actually means we have a very high uptime on our Dragonheart skill. Heavy Bowgun can easily just maintain Dragonheart by shoulder checking an attack and taking a little bit off the top of our HP, and then we just continue to drain and shoot without worry of losing Dragonheart. My Bowgun doesn't really have that option to take a hit, nor should it, but even if you stay, topped off 100% of the time, you don't get hit, you still only have about a 40-second downtime window with no Dragonheart active after you cure Bloodlust, but then you have 90 seconds of it being active. So really, it's up 2/3 of the time anyway, which is still really good for 10% raw and 50 all resistance. And while you can augment for other things, just to be more consistent and not have to rely on Dragonheart, I mean, they're going to end up about the same anyway. I think Dragonheart's just a little bit better. So our goal right now for raw gunning is to be squeezing on Dragonheart, because honestly, we have pretty much all the other skills already, so there's not much more we can do. And you can easily put this in with the armor augments or by using it as a level 4 decoration now and then augmenting around the other skills that you would need instead. So we're going to be taking our base set here, which should get you most of the skills you need for basic raw gunning. I'm going to be using my God Charm since charms are way more accessible now, but you can pretty much use anything that's, Wex 2 or Spare Shot 2, and any serviceable amount of level 3 or level 1 skills that we would normally use, like Shot Type Up, MO Up, Recoil, Reload, Sniper, whatever. Losing the Attack 3, not a big deal, trust me. And if you're hurting for slots, like you need to get in like another point of like crit boost or Wex or spare shot, just get rid of the attack boost. Trust me, it's a luxury skill, it's not going to make that much of a difference. So with this base though, without augments, you can typically fit in all the skills that you need to get your raw bowguns up and gunning. Again though, you will need to play around with some of your slot augments and stuff to shift around for enough recoil and reload depending on what bowgun you're using, but this should be a fine base regardless. From here on though, the next step is kind of up to you. For Dragonheart, you can just augment every single piece for Dragonheart and call it a day there with Dragonheart 5, which you'll be able to sustain pretty easily. You can also go for Dragonheart 4 and Bloodlust 1 to allow you to make use of Coalescence and then get the extra affinity from Bloodlust, and then just gem in that last piece of Dragonheart. Remember that Bloodlust does give you the ability to refresh your HP so you're not eventually just sitting at 1. You can also forego Dragonheart and then augment in Bloodlust 3 and Mail of Hellfire for more, static buffs, and then just use Dereliction to maintain resentment. That also works out just fine. Hellfire 3 is worth 35 raw, which is pretty close to the 10% we would be getting from Dragonheart anyway. It just comes at the cost of having like minus 100 defense, which, we're gonna get one tapped anyway, so big deal. But that's kind of your options. Dragonheart is technically the strongest, and if you turbo min-max your augments, you can fit in Bloodlust 3 and still run Dragonheart. But either way, you have 3 augment plans you can make use for this set and piece together your bowguns. This set will work for all raw gunning, light bowgun and heavy bowgun, all ammo types. While I'm sure you can make slightly more optimal sets, having one set work for a large archetype is proving to be very valuable, as armor augmenting is getting kinda crazy. Don't forget that depending on what other supportive MMOs you may use, you may need more or less recoil and reload decorations. So moving on to elemental gunning. We're still going to be using one set for all elemental gunning, which we were doing in the past, which is nice, but you definitely need to make multiple copies of these armors to shuffle down recoil and reload decorations, as elemental gunning definitely needs a lot more level 1 slots than raw gunning. First, let me discuss what had changed with elemental gunning. And the big thing is the dragon conversion skill on Risen, Crimson Glow, Valstrax. That's a mouthful. With all 3 levels of dragon conversion, you convert all of your elemental resistance to elemental damage, at a measly 8% conversion rate for gunners, so if you have 100 resistance, you get 8 element. Woohoo. Sadly though, elemental gunning doesn't have very many ways to scale flat elemental damage. Most of the stuff is percentage based, so flat element is actually really strong, and so we're definitely going to be using dragon conversion. Dragon conversion does have another side effect though, that while you're in blue scroll, you can hit a target for X amount of hits based on your weapon to gain 15 all res permanently, so long as you attack at least once every 10 seconds, which is great for some extra damage. However, 15 all res is really only going to be giving us 60, as dragon element will be capped anyways, and 60 all res is only 4 true element for bowguns. It's good, but also light bowgun needs to hit 180 times to activate this, meaning it's a lot of pierce ammo we dump with no buffs, so it's not really worth going for. Heavy bowgun only requires 80 hits, but that's still about 20 shots without having any buffs, and I don't think you're really going to be offset that damage enough in a hunt, so I personally wouldn't bother trying to get that activated, just stick to red scroll. Good news about dragon conversion though, is that the 3 pieces of Risen Strax armor that have it are the 3 pieces of Geismagorm that don't have Dereliction, meaning that we can still run Dereliction 3 and Dragon Conversion 3, so that's a lot of flat element, and that's basically the set. We sadly don't want to augment for Dragonheart for elemental gunning, even though it would grant us 50 all resistance, because while under the effects of Dragon Blight, you deal no status or elemental damage, so that does get negated. What we do want to augment though is for Furious. Furious is the Rajang skill that's new to the augment pool. It's a really cheap skill, still a B tier skill, so should be widely available. Now what Furious does is it gives us 20 all resistance for the 3 points, which will get converted by dragon conversion. And since we're going to stick in the red scroll anyway, we don't have to bother with Furious to scroll swap for stamina stuff, like don't worry about it, just stick to red. And so Furious is going to be the first thing you want to augment on your set, and really I wouldn't recommend putting this together until you do augment Furious, because the extra 100 all res is pretty good. From this point on, you have a couple of options for how you can finish up your elemental bowgun sets. You can either augment for Strife, which is also new to the augment pool. Strife basically permanently gives us 15% more element damage, 20% if you're under 40% HP. It's strong, but the downside is that you'll eventually be sitting at 1 HP, which can be an upside if you're planning to eat for heroics anyways. But also you can't be using Bloodlust because that will reset your HP, which means you also won't be able to make use of Coalescence, which is more flat element. But you can still run Strife. Like I said though, flat element is better than percent element. The other option you can do is just augment for slots and elemental resistances and gem in as much resistance as you can. to have all that converted into elemental damage anyways. It's a slightly weaker option, but it is stable and consistent, not reliant on crits or weak zones or maintaining HP brackets. It's just simple. And then finally, you can augment Bloodlust and then your other supportive skills that we were using before, like Elemental Exploit, Elemental Crit, Coalescence, and Burst. Elemental Exploit and Elemental Crit are really nice to augment because you can then max those out with one level 4 decoration, which is pretty good. Bloodlust is still great because it does keep our HP topped off so we can keep it up consistently. It allows us to activate Coalescence for flat raw and element, and then it also works towards crit and crit element, which is also very good. It ends up being pretty much as good, if not a little bit better than Strife. Ultimately, these three paths will end up within about 10% damage of each other, but I do believe Bloodlust and crit setup is the best way to go, because going Strife and the other element path just scales the element side, but you still do a good chunk of raw with your elemental damage as well, so you do want to kind of go with both, and doing crits at least does help the raw side as well. Again, maybe you can min-max these a little bit further, but I like having one set for anything. I don't know if there's much room to negotiate with these because the set pieces are basically locked in stone. But again, just reiterating, this set will work for light and heavy bowguns, all the elements. You do need to augment shuffle for slots and recoil levels and reloads, so you just need to make sure you have multiple pieces and keep your augments separate. Armor augment right now is really wacky, I'm sorry. It's kind of impossible for me to just tell you what specifically you need to augment for. Just do your best to come as close as possible. So that's going to be all for the bowgun updates for Title Update 4. We did get a fair amount of power for sure. I did not want to update the other weaker MOs like Normal 3, Spread 2, and Explosives, but I may make more shield heavy bowgun sets in the future now that Embolden is a decoration. But that's basically going to be all for me for now. Don't forget to check the MHR albums for more information, and go ahead and hit me up on stream or Discord or whatever if you need help or don't understand something. But thank you all to my Patreon members. I appreciate you all a whole bunch. But yeah, that's all for me. Thanks and good luck out there.